Good morning. Karen Lewis is the current president of the Chicago Teachers Union, one of the largest local educators unions in the United States. Ms. Lewis is a product of the Chicago Public Schools, and both her mother and father were Chicago Public Schools teachers. She taught high school chemistry in Chicago Public Schools for 22 years. Chicago is the center of the debate about reforming education. As CEO of Chicago Public Schools, Arne Duncan presided over a program to dramatically change education as we know it, Renaissance 2010. The policies pushed by Duncan and others included closing neighborhood schools, creating many exclusive charter schools, and targeting teachers as a central problem in education. Many of these policies are being encouraged by the U.S. Department of Education and reproduced nationally. Karen Lewis was one of the many educators and community members in Chicago who questioned these policies, especially how they impacted challenged communities and how they affect equity in learning. She realized that educators are not organized enough and had few meaningful connections with community organizations and faith organizations. She was one of many who observed that response to Duncan's policies by the Chicago's teacher union was lackadaisical and sometimes completely absent. She and other educators created a caucus in the CTU called CORE, the Committee of Rank and File Educators. They challenged the paradigm of top-down control and lack of democracy in their own union, an organizational model which unfortunately mirrored the organization of Chicago Public Schools. CORE began as a study group in 2007, but soon began to organize educators and connect with other community groups in ways that haven't been seen in generations. They also helped to refocus the work of educators as leaders in working for social justice. When the CTU did little to respond to the epidemic of school closings, CORE organized parent meetings, community forums, and more. In 2009, CORE helped to cancel 6 of 30 planned school closings. This had never happened before. In 2010, there were only 16 planned closings, and community organizing again succeeded in canceling 6 more. CORE also started meaningful work on the issue of charter schools in Chicago. Duncan greatly enabled and expanded charters. Chicago has nearly all their charter schools in community of color, yet many are more segregated than the regular schools. They're not meeting the needs of the neighborhood populations, in many cases destroying the communities they're intended to serve. CORE activism and organizing has helped to expose these policies and work towards changing them. In 2010, CORE fielded a slate of candidates in the CTU elections and were swept into office with Ms. Lewis as the CTU president. Since her election, the new leaders of CTU have worked to rebuild the image of educators in the media and expand connections in the community. They're moving their union from a business model to a model of organizing. Ms. Lewis continues to work tirelessly to make her own union and community more democratic, more responsive to the needs of members, and more transparent. She is currently at the center of a very challenging fight in Chicago with the new CEO of Chicago Schools, Rahm Emanuel, which has national implications. She is a model for all of us how we can empower ourselves as teacher activists. Please give a warm welcome to Karen Lewis.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, please turn off your cell phones if you have not already. Thank you.
I think I turned mine off. Okay, so you heard everything then. There's nothing for me to say, right? All right, so I was a teacher minding my own business in my room, closing my door, not paying attention to what was really going on. A friend of mine called and said, Jesse, who's our vice president, Jesse Sharkey, is starting a new caucus. I'm like, you know what? I'm getting ready to retire. I'm done. The union sucks. They don't want to do any better. I'm done. Well, Karen, would you come to a study group? All right, so I'm a nerd. I'm a sucker for a book club. So I said, okay. And that was 2008, by the way, not 2007. There were 8 people sitting around a table in a community organization. It's the Pilsen Alliance. Pilsen is predominantly Mexican-American community in Chicago. And as you can tell by the name, at one point it had been a German community. Obviously, things have changed. So I took my fat behind up 3 flights of stairs in an unair-conditioned building and sat down and started reading the whole plan behind school closings in Chicago. And what it turns out is this was a real estate plan. This had absolutely nothing to do with education. It was a clear real estate plan. It was called Renaissance 2010. And all of the schools that had been targeted for closure were in rapidly gentrifying areas of Chicago. And our union missed that. Just saying. Now, I taught at a selective enrollment school for 20 years. So I was never in danger of losing my job. Plus, I look dang good on paper, okay? I am the only black woman in the class of 1974 from Dartmouth College. Woo. People are impressed. Let me tell you, I spent those years smoking lots of weed, self-medicating. Self-medicating. Yeah, thank you. Sounds like you all did too. Oh, I'm sorry, there are kids here. I wasn't supposed to say that, right? Too late. See why my students like me? I taught really good chemistry, let me tell you. So, I was never in danger of losing my job. And even if my school closed, which was almost impossible, that I got the 2 master's degrees, I'm nationally board certified, I always believed in getting the credentials they say you need. Because when I grew up in a family that said, if you're black, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. That's what my parents told me, because that was what the expectations were. I wasn't that good at working hard, so I figured I had to work smart. So I'm affirmative action, baby. Everything was cool in the early 70s when I went to college. So I said, how do we utilize this? How do we utilize this? Again, 8 people sitting around a table. Once we did the analysis, because we had already some relationships with community organizations, but also with a really good professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, who had been looking at this. Research is the key to debunking the myths. What do? We're nerds. We like to study. This is how we roll. So we said, we have a plan. If we offer you a plan, a better plan, then you should take that into consideration. Now, the union leadership had said they do things a certain way because they wanted to be equal to the boss. Okay. But they were the crazy things, like making the same amount of money and driving a fancy car and having people to drive you around and wearing fur coats and, crazy stuff. How about a fur coat on a picket line? That is the funniest thing ever. I'm sorry. And a fur coat. Oh, I have the pictures to prove it. So we said, why don't you all show up at the hearings when they decide to close schools? We just started simply going to the hearings and testifying about why that shouldn't happen. And there were 2 things we noticed. Not one single board member was at the hearing. There was always some 15-year-old representing Chicago Public Schools. I'm like, did somebody card that kid? I represent the CEO. I'm like, no kidding. Literally, looked like the students. The union wasn't there. Teachers were afraid to testify. I'm like, why are you afraid to testify? You're going to lose your job anyway. They said they're closing down your school. You're going to lose your job. Get up and raise some cane. But no. So Then we decided to read Shock Doctrine as our, how many people have read that? I know, right? Show a hand. What? How many people have read Shock Doctrine? Let me see some hands. All right, and those of you that haven't, buy the book. Shock Doctrine lays out historically what is going on right now. It is the story of how the elite ruling classes have decided that public institutions have to go because they are in the way of profit. Okay? And it starts out with the Chicago boys, those wonderful guys from Chile that went to business school in Chicago under Milton Friedman and the rest of the Ayn Rand crowd. And they exported neoliberalism to Chile. Privatize, privatize, privatize. Free market. Because the markets make everything better. Right? Like 2008? Oh, yeah. So, once I read that, I was like done. I said, okay, I guess we have to do something. So we started going to the hearings. We started small, going to the hearings, and then challenging our union in our House of Delegates meeting and said, why isn't the union here? So the union's response was, we'll help you write resumes. Really? Oh, yeah, that's going to help. So, unfortunately, in Chicago, we have been under a terrible, terrible, terrible burden since 1995, when the state legislature gave the Chicago public schools to the mayor. So we do not have an elected school board. We have an appointed school board. Let me just tell you a couple of people who are on this board right now as we speak. Does anyone know who Henry Beenan is? All right, so this sounds good on paper, right? He's the former president of Northwestern University. Sounds okay, right? Educator, knows something. This guy was on the directorship, on the board of Bear Stearns in 2007 when it crashed. This guy. Anybody know who Penny Pritzker is? Few people know who Penny Pritzker is, right? The Pritzker fortune that owns the Hyatt hotels, that won't pay their cleaning ladies a living wage. She's on. These are the people we're dealing with. Okay? We have another person on that is absolutely committed to the turnaround model. Turnaround. Do you know what those are? Where they come in, shut your whole school down, get rid of everybody. Not just the teachers and the paraprofessionals, but the lunchroom ladies. Everybody loves the lunchroom ladies. They have to go too. So I don't know, you must have heard a couple of years ago, there was a kid that was beaten to death at Finger High School because of the turnaround policies and the school closing policy. This kid had to leave his neighborhood and cross significant gang territories. We don't like to talk about these things, but Chicago is not a particularly safe place in certain areas. Certain areas are actually run by drug gangs. Period. The end. But we can pretend they don't exist when we're sitting in a building downtown Chicago, not just a building, but an air-conditioned building in downtown Chicago, and we could look at the numbers and say, well, we can close this school and send all the kids over here. Not realizing that when that happens, our dropout rate spikes because most kids figure, I won't go to school instead of putting my life on the line. Those are our choices. Go to school or get killed. A lot of people don't get that. And then they don't believe it. The people that read the newspaper in Chicago, it can't be as bad as you say it is. It's not like that where I live. Really? Do you know that Chicago's the most segregated city in America? And always has been? I know, right? Anyway, my hometown. So anyway, we decided to challenge this authority. We did not have an election strategy. Does anybody know here who Jenny Sims is? From Vancouver, up I-5? You guys know who Jenny Sims is? Jenny Sims ran an illegal strike in British Columbia some years ago as the president of the British Columbia Teachers Union. And we invited her down to talk to us. We had grown from 8 to about 35 when she came down. And she said, "How many of you are there?" And we said, "This is us." And she said, "Oh, well, you might want to think about an electoral strategy that will allow you to win a few seats on the executive board. And then maybe after a few election cycles, when people know who you are, you can run and perhaps change your union." 18 months later, we won. And then I looked at everybody and said, "Now what are we going to do?" So, how do you change a union that doesn't want to change? How do you change a union where the members say, "I've paid my dues. What is the union going to do for me?" How many people have heard that? How many of you have said it? Okay. Exactly. So we went in as complete oppositionists. Now, mind you, constant struggle. We put 4,000 teachers, parents, and community leaders in the streets of downtown Chicago at rush hour, and it didn't make the news. We stopped Mayor Daley's limo. And it didn't make the news. But it didn't make the news because corporate media didn't want to cover it. It didn't make the news because the previous president was afraid that the news people might interview me. It was the Tuesday before the election. God forbid that Karen, who is not afraid of a camera, not afraid of a crowd, obviously. Oh, I didn't bring a speech to read. The woman that ran the union for 6 years, nice lady, heart in the right place, cared about the members, cared about teachers, completely inarticulate, the poster child for bad teacher. She had a speech impediment, and she was nervous. She wasn't comfortable. But she also didn't prepare herself. This is why I'm glad you guys are here, because you are preparing yourself to be advocates of our children, of learning, and what real teaching is. That's why you're here. When you are as passionate about teaching and learning as I am, and I'm just going to use myself as an example here, it's easy to talk about what works. It's easy to make the connection with people to see how important what it is we do. But if you have someone who's ultimately uncomfortable in this high-profile position, it works against you, not for you. So, trying to bring democracy and trying to get people to make decisions when, quite frankly, they don't want to. People want, quote-unquote, leadership. So we said, okay, what do you guys want to do? And they were like, nah, you tell us what to do and then we'll do it. What? So we spent the first year just trying to figure out how to run a union. Because it's easy to be in opposition and tell somebody what they do wrong. It's also very easy to make critiques. It's very difficult to figure out how to do the work. Don't think it isn't. So those of you that have aspirations, understand when we actually won, the thing that I said in my speech was now comes the hard work. This was the easy part. Running an election, going around. And how do you do that? You do that by having someone in every building who believes that teaching and learning is the most important thing we do, who understands what the agenda is to destroy it, and who values our children. If you find one person in the building, you can take an entire building. That's right. That's what you have to do. And then you have to buy a pair of boxing gloves. Because, and I got mine hanging in my office, because once we got elected, the forces of evil came out. So my first few weeks in office, right before we went to office, let me just step back a second, we did not have a transition period. It's kind of hard when you ask someone that they want to turn around and help you, because what they really want is to see you fail so they can come back. So what the president told me is, this was her words of advice, you don't know what you don't know. Thank you. So, what did we do? We analyzed the operation. So there were some people there that we didn't understand their function. They couldn't really explain it. So we said, bye-bye. There were other people there that were doing amazing work. We said, thank you. Would you like to stay and work with us? And they were like, yes. Because for some people, the idea of going back to the classroom is absolutely anathema. For me, it's like I'm crying every day. Some days I just drive by my old school and look up at my window. I know it's awful, and I just go, can I just go back to my kids? I do it pretty regularly, and especially when somebody's beating me up. But the good news is, we knew this job was going to be tough when we took it. So I'm not here to complain, okay? I'm not here to complain. But what I am going to tell you is, be expected to be vilified. You all should go to the Chicago Tribune editorial cartoons. There is a vicious, nasty cartoon of me with my fat butt sitting on a little tiny chair in the corner with a dunce cap on, and they made sure they darkened me up so in case people didn't know. Had my locks, you know. My husband wants to beat somebody up. It's the hardest part, quite frankly, is going to be on your family. If you decide to make this move, be prepared. And for my husband, who's an old school brother, you don't talk about his woman. You don't attack his woman. And I have to say, baby, let them do it, because you can't go to jail. And I'm too fat to go to jail, is what I tell them. I can't fit in the cell. So I have to behave a little bit. But I'm losing weight because I'm preparing to go, because they're going to send me to jail. I know it at some point. I'm going to jail. That's why I'm losing weight, just so I can fit in a cell and sit on that little toilet. That's the only reason. You'd have liked my chemistry class, wouldn't you have? So anyway, I'm going to finish so you guys can go do workshops. But anyway, it is my goal to bring the joy of teaching and learning back to the classroom where it belongs. Because this job used to be so much fun. And I don't think it was just because I was younger. I think because in those days, we worked together to accomplish this goal. People mentored you without having to be paid, without having to be cajoled. I don't remember somebody sitting around going, she's a really bad teacher. Somebody would say, she needs some help. Let's help her. That's gone. That's gone now. And that collaborative skill is starting to disappear. As we bring the business model into the school system, we end up with competition instead of collaboration. That's not good for kids. So, I don't know how long I will have to do this. It doesn't matter. I have committed every fiber of my being, as have the people that I have the pleasure and honor of working with. We're a diverse group. I'm the old dame. Sometimes I look at them and go, children. And they don't want to listen to me because we have a democratic way of doing things. So I only get one vote. But I've started telling them, but I get the biggest vote because you know what? The Constitution says I'm the president. So sometimes I need to veto some of this silliness. But most of the time, it's not the case. And they tell me, we will figure this out. So, every single thing that we have done, build capacity in our communities, work with other people, with parents, with organizations. Now the school system is doing. They have an initiative. Or Rahm Emanuel just bought some preachers because they have that kind of money. Oh yeah, so be prepared for the bought preachers and the bought community organizations. But there will always be people who will stand with you because we are doing good, righteous work. Remember that. Remember that. And eventually the people who have been bought want to get in on it. They like righteousness. They'll say, well, maybe I should give that money back, or I'll spend it and then I won't get any more. But the key is, they will always continue to move the bar. Please be ready for this. And when you think you've got something down, like we got the schools stopped closing. Last year they didn't close any. Unheard of. Unheard of. Why? Because we have been raising hell about it. So they finally passed a bill in the state legislature that says CPS has to have a 10-year plan. They have to have a plan that involves the community before they start deciding to close schools. Rahm Emanuel went down to Springfield and said, don't pass this bill because I just got elected. I'm like, so did I. I just got elected and you put a bill out to take away every single bargaining right we have. Couldn't bargain over class size, length of school day, no merit pay. They could impose. They were going to make whatever collective bargaining rights we had prohibited. Didn't want us to strike. When I first met with him, I said, why don't you want us to strike? Why are you so worried about a strike? We haven't had a strike in 23 years. No strike, no strike, no strike, no strike. What? I said, the only reason why you want to take away our right to strike is you have something planned that's really ugly. So, they had a 75% bar. Is Andy Combs here? From Tacoma, is he here? God, I want to meet this guy. I've only talked to him on the phone. But 85% said we're going out. 93% said to hell with your injunction. That's courage, baby. That's courage. That's who you should have up here, not me. This is the guy I want to know. So, here we are. You are going to have to fight slogans, the PR machines, and I mean Rahm Emanuel, that's all he does. He polls, makes edicts, throws out something every day at 3 o'clock, and then the unions, what does the union say? So, the longer school day is going to change everything. It's just going to fix everything that's wrong with Chicago public schools. And I want a longer school day. I went down there, and I was going to get it, and I'll come back, I want 90 minutes. I said, what do you want? 90 minutes. Why not? So I said, why? We can't have kids on the street at 2:15. So I said, oh, so this has nothing to do with education. This has everything to do with babysitting and warehousing. He jumped out of his chair and said, F you, Lewis. So I jumped out of my chair and said something that I'm not going to let you record. Because he'll see this, because, you know, everything I do, they watch. And they poll, and they, you know, they have their little, because the rich people that really run Chicago and run the PR machine, oh my God, these guys. So, this is what we're fighting. And you know that. We're fighting a constant battle to devalue public education, to demonize teachers. We've had 30 years of demonizing teachers, and then Arne Duncan all right, can I just ask one question? If the president had appointed the custodian who works in a hospital, Surgeon General, what would the physicians have done? I think they'd be beyond that. They would have risen up and said, have you lost your mind? But we get Arne Duncan with a BA in sociology from Harvard. Don't be impressed, because he didn't take any science and math classes, betcha. Because they didn't have requirements. People get impressed. Harvard, no, it's hard to get in. It's not hard to stay. I'm just saying. He was an athlete, so he might not have been self-medicating, but I wouldn't count on it. I'm just saying. This guy who has the nerve to stand up and say, education is a civil rights issue of our time. Now, you know he went to private school, because if he had gone to public school, he'd have had that lisp fixed. I know, that was ugly, wasn't it? I'm sorry. This guy. So, you ask him a question, he's just a list of talking points. And that's the problem now. Nobody does the research. So guess what we did? We decided we're not taking the 21% annuities. We're not taking the car allowances. We're not taking all the crazy perks that union leaders get so we can hire people to help us in this struggle. We got research department. We got an organizing department. How do you have a union with no organizing department? You can make a difference, and you should make a difference. You guys, thank you so much for having me.